This winter, and I might start out by saying I'm Linda Langston, NACo's president. I have with us the other executive officers and many members of the National Association of Counties. So this winter has been tremendously hard on our communities, especially on our transportation systems. A recent CNBC survey estimated that the severe weather we've experienced this winter will cost the U.S. economy roughly $50 billion. And AAA estimates that this winter's potholes alone will cost American consumers $5 billion in car repairs. When we think about the cost to counties, we don't just consider the amount we had to spend to plow and to salt our roads, but also to the cost that we will incur long after the snow melts. As the owners of 45% of America's roads and 39% of America's bridges, U.S. county officials know that some of the biggest costs related to storms like the ones that were experienced this week in D.C. will be related to the maintenance and repairs that we'll be making several months out, which will have a long-term impact on our local transportation budgets. Similar kinds of impacts have occurred in the Midwest and really all across the nation. And where I'm from in Iowa, the frost is estimated to be between 5 and 6 feet deep. It'll likely keep us from repairing roads until the middle or the end of May. Don't know if you've ever seen a frost boil eat gravel, but it can eat tons of it, and you'll never know that anything was put on it. Counties are on the front line, not just when there's a storm like this and we're forced to respond, but also when the infrastructure and services we provide fail to meet the expectations of our communities. We hear when our neighbors hit those potholes. And I don't know about you, I've never found a neighbor that really cares whether that pothole is a Republican or a Democrat. They just want that pothole filled. So that's our reality. Our reality is that we have to take action. Our constituents can't get to work when the roads haven't been plowed. They can't get to getting their things to market. I like to say whether it's corn, soybeans, hogs, pigs, or natural gas, you can't get it to market when a bridge is blocked. And that's what's happening in places all over the nation with deficient bridges. People can drive as much as an extra 25 miles just to get to where they need to go. This frontline experience is why we're so passionate about MAP 21 and the future of the federal surface transportation funding and policies. It's also why counties should be and want to be at the table as Congress develops the next surface transportation bill. Likely every journey, whether it's people or farm goods, likely starts on a county road. With MAP 21 set to expire at the end of September, we want to make sure that Congress understands how vital federal transportation funding is to our communities and the role counties play in the nation's transportation system. The turnout today represents our commitment to work with Congress and to address the nation's infrastructure needs. We are honored and inspired that we will be joined by many of our partners in Congress, and these congressional members understand why counties matter, and they're the ones who are willing to stand with us as we urge their colleagues to pass a multi-year surface transportation bill that provides us with the long-term funding certainty that we need to provide for our nation's roads. I'd like to start out by introducing Representative Earl Blumenauer from Oregon. He serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, which has jurisdiction over the federal gas tax, and he is addressing the Highway Trust Fund solvency. He's introduced a bill to increase the gas tax, and I might add that, you know, sometimes these issues make for strange bedfellows. So if you look at the people who are supporting the increase in the federal gas tax, there are businesses, the Chamber, the Farm Bureau, everybody wants our roads to work. We appreciate that. NACo supports an increase in the gas tax to pay for federal highway transit and highway programs. So Representative, would you like to join us up here?
Thank Thanks for the kind invitation. Thank you for being here with your message. Frost boil. I mean, this is important to get these concepts out that make a difference for you day in and day out. I spent one of the most interesting 8 years of my life apprenticing as a member of the Multnomah County Commission in Portland, Oregon. I served on the NACo Transportation Committee, and believe me, I appreciate that you folks are on the front line, and you're the most important area of government that nobody really knows anything about and takes for granted, except, of course, when there is a hiccup. And so I deeply appreciate your service in that vital area and your being here to carry your message. And the fact that you have approaching half the road inventory, over a third of the bridges. I mean, this is something that you rely on partnerships with the state, with the local, and with the federal government. And I applaud you for being resolute in wanting a multi-year reauthorization, not a little 27-month hiccup, and certainly not 9 extensions. Like, you know, you've lived through it. But there is no reasonable, feasible action that is going to enable us to meet your needs this year. You know, it's kind of funny. People say, well, Earl, this gas tax, you know, we're not certain that it's really got political legs. Okay. I was invited to a conference at the Harvard Business School last week on infrastructure, and it was as only Harvard can do. They brought everybody to the table. I think there were 6 Fortune 500 CEOs, all these academic experts. There were local officials. There were the American Trucking Association president. And it was kind of, at this point, when I got down to where to pay for it, I kind of laid out what we've done. And was able to point out that we were joined with some of those strange bedfellows. Business, labor, the AAA and the truckers, labor unions, environmentalists, transit. And at that same day, we had the response to the president. And I think the president believes in infrastructure, and I'm glad he laid that out, $300 billion. But what was the announcement? Dead on arrival. Ain't going to go anyplace. My friend Dave Camp, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, had his proposal as part of the Republican tax reform. And it was dead on arrival. It ain't going anyplace. Well, maybe we could look at where there is a broad base of support for something that's proven. We haven't raised the gas tax for 21 years. That was back, as you well know, when gasoline was $1.08 a gallon, and before Barack had met Michelle. So we hope that you will continue to add your voices, because this is how we're going to get Congress to get a little backbone implant. I welcome anybody who's got a better idea. I've been working on this in Congress for 19 years. I haven't heard anything that's going to be predictable, that's going to keep you out of a general fund food fight, that you can rely upon, and that will meet the need this year. You know better than anybody in America that the clock is ticking. September 30th, we've exhausted the Highway Trust Fund. There will be no money for major new projects. And in fact, because the Department of Transportation can't run this down to the second, they're going to stop cutting checks this summer so that they have some sort of balance as a contingency. Which means your states are going to be cutting back late in the spring in many cases, and you pay the price. So I can't thank you enough for being here. There is no Republican or Democratic bridge or pothole or transit system or bike lane. And there was a time when infrastructure brought our country together, whether it was the interstate highway system or the transcontinental railroads. And I deeply appreciate your adding your voice. I hope that it's firm and direct, and that every visit that you have on Capitol Hill is asking people, if they don't support this, What's their answer? How do we avoid this? You deserve not just answers, but action. And I will work as best I can to try and support you in this effort, and deeply, deeply appreciate your being here and adding your voice to this important issue.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Ricky Hokama. I'm NACo's first vice president. And through this summer, I believe we'll have a smooth transition from President Langston's tenure to my ability to lead our organization. I foresee a seamless transition from President Langston's resiliency initiative into my initiative will be the reinvestment in our country's infrastructure. And I'd like to just share with you some points this afternoon that our research done by our research department within our organization recently has proven what we already know. That right now, our country remains in a very fragile and uneven economic recovery mode. The federal and state funding for county transportation projects is increasingly inadequate. But the counties face the dilemma of rising costs of transportation projects, increasing traffic volumes, and limitations on their ability to generate revenue. Our country's counties have adopted additional funding and financing mechanisms where they are not sufficient to cover the needs of their businesses and their residents. We all know currently we're operating in a global economy, and this demands a seamless, world-class transportation system. MAP 21 provided major reforms in federal highway and transit policy and funding. However, it was only matched with 2 years funding. 2 years of funding does not allow the counties to make long-term plans or transformative investments in our transportation systems. In fact, it holds up projects and forces us to cut services that our community depends, and not only depends, but demands from us. As major players and investors in the nation's transportation system, counties need long-term certainty to make the types of investment needed to keep the U.S. competitive in a global economy. Now, NACo wants to work with Congress to maintain America's economic competitiveness by maintaining and expanding our transportation system. And that is why I will be focusing my presidential initiative on transportation and infrastructure. And it is also why I believe it is critical for our Congress to pass a 6-year reauthorization bill. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, my name is Chris Rogers, and I serve as NACo's immediate past president. I also have the honor of being appointed to the U.S. Department of Transportation's Freight Advisory Council. I'm one of 3 county commissioners or supervisors around the country that's appointed there. The other is a commissioner in the state of Georgia and a commissioner in the state of Florida. And I have the privilege of serving on the First and Last Mile Committee. I want to reiterate that to what the Congressman said and us having our voice at the table. Through the hard work of staff and many of the people behind me, we've been working for the last couple of years to put our voice at the table and build a relationship with USDOT. And I think the results of 3 county members being on that advisory committee is a result of that. And we hope to continue that in the past, in the future. The Freight Advisory Committee was established to give stakeholders a voice to engage in a long-time process of creating a freight strategic plan for our country and making sure that we're competitive for economic development in the future, not only locally but internationally. And in my role on the Freight Advisory Committee, I participate in the strategic planning process to make sure the views of counties have been brought to the table, to make sure that, as our incoming president next year said, that we have a stable MAP 21 plan that's long-term, that allows us to plan, but also incorporates the other efforts that we're doing as counties in the rural parts of our country and the urban parts of our country to connect freight, to connect our communities, to relieve congestion, and to make sure that our country is viable financially and with the physical infrastructure, but also with the financial infrastructure of free market competitiveness. So with that, we look forward to working with the USDOT, and thank you all for being here.
I'd ask that Bob Fox come up.
Thank you. I'm from rural Minnesota, Renville County, and our problem is that last year there was no funds. We should be doing 20 miles of road every year, every 20 years to do this project to keep it going. The money we got would do 3 miles. So our commission took it upon ourselves and did, for the first time, we bonded for $10 million to do roads. The problem is that 12 years ago when I became a commissioner, it cost $275,000 to do a 10-ton road. Now it costs almost $1 million. That is the funding problem. We have not kept up. My county is first in corn, soybeans, or sweet corn, or sugar beets, just depending on how Mother Nature treats us. But to get those crops to the market, we have to have a corridor of commerce. And that means 10-ton roads with quality in those roads. So we need funding, and we need stable funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I'd like to invite up Jim Healy, who's DuPage County, Illinois, and who's chair of our Transportation Steering Committee.
I've been a member of NACo for 14 years, and one thing I've learned is that transportation crosses all lines. It's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's not an urban. It is not a rural. It's all of those. Whether it is King County in Washington or Dade County in Florida, whether it is Maui County in Hawaii, Gaston County in South Carolina, whether it is Dunn County in Wisconsin or Tarrant County in Texas. Everybody needs the roads to move their people and their products, and without a long-term, fully funded transportation bill, we will not be able to do this. So we plead with Congress to please join NACo, and we will continue to offer whatever support we can on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim, and I'd ask Christian to come up, who's the chair of NACO's Transportation Steering Committee's Transit and Rail Subcommittee.
Thank you very much, President Langston. I am also the chair of the board for the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania and a commissioner in Berks County, Pennsylvania, home of the Reading Railroad. I think that looking at Pennsylvania in 2013 is a good lesson on how we can get comprehensive transportation legislation through here in the United States Congress. For many, many years, Pennsylvania lacked a comprehensive transportation funding bill. And last year you saw labor and business, Democrats, Republicans, Chamber, the County Commissioners Association, the Township Supervisors Association all come together recognizing that we needed a comprehensive funding solution, B, it needed to be long-term, it's a 5-year plan, and C, that it was tough. It is difficult to go out and do the hard work of governance, and transportation is one of those more difficult areas. We ended up funding by releasing the cap on the tax on the wholesale price of gasoline, which includes diesel fuel. And in the fall of last year, it passed overwhelmingly in our Senate twice and very close in a vote in the House. But at the end of the day, we got it done. And many of us stood together a day or two before that final vote on the Capitol steps with our governor, with labor, with House members, Senate members, CCAP, supervisors, in our case, supervisors from townships. And we called on our House and Senate members to support comprehensive transportation funding. I'm proud to say Pennsylvania did get it done. I'm confident, because of our experience in Pennsylvania, that through the leadership of NACo and many of my colleagues and leadership of congressmen and congresswomen that have the courage to stand up and say this needs to be done, it will get done. Let me close with this. I believe as I look at our country, the two most important aspects to our economy, to our public safety, and to the business of what we do is our transportation infrastructure and our electric grid. Those are absolutely critical. There's no way that we can continue to turn our backs on the transportation needs and stay competitive as a nation and take care of the public safety issues in our local communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. I'd invite Joan Murphy, Chair of our Ports Subcommittee, to speak.
Well, my concerns are with everyone else as far as transportation is concerned. I serve on the High Speed Rail Commission for the state of Illinois, and even though we don't see that high speed rail is going to go very far right now, it's something we need to think of for the future in order to stay competitive in a global economy. We lay far behind Europe in this matter. They celebrated 50 years of high speed rail last year, and we have nothing here. So we're hoping that we can do something about that. I chair the Port Subcommittee, and we have a problem. Only half of the Harbor Maintenance Tax Fund is being spent each year for our ports. We have the Panama Canal, large ships coming in. They'll be coming up the East Coast, and there are only 3 ports right now that can handle those huge ships coming in. We need dredging on our East Coast ports. We need to free up the other half of the Harbor Maintenance Tax Fund. There's going to be approximately $10 billion in that by the end of 2014, and only half of that is going to be spent. 30% of the money that's being spent is being spent for non-revenue bearing ports and flooding and things that have nothing to do with bringing revenue into the United States. That money needs to be spent on ports so that we can accept these larger ships, have more goods brought into this country, more goods being exported from this country. So I hope that they will look at this in Congress and free up the Harbor Maintenance Tax Fund, not use it for the national debt, but for the purpose that it was intended, and that was to keep our ports healthy and strong.
Thank you, Joan. I'd like Brian Roberts, the Executive Director of the National Association of County Engineers, to come up.
It's getting kind of tight up here, isn't it? I feel like I'm commuting on the Metro, but you all are much better looking. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak with you here today. I represent the 2,000 county engineers that build and maintain these 45% of roads and 230,000 bridges, and I'm preaching to the choir in some sense here, but we feel strongly how you feel. We need a long-term, 6-year, Ricky, transportation bill, and I'll repeat what you said to make it clear. It's got to address our infrastructure crisis. It grows our economy by moving products and services to market, creates jobs, and improves safety. But I want to hit on 3 very specific issues, and I'll be brief. I think they're serious issues, but I think there's relatively simple solutions to them. Now, funding this is not coming up with the trillion, billion, whatever number you want to use on this is not simple, but we also need to look at the distribution of these funds. Because too often, I look at this as a resource allocation problem. You have so many resources, where do they go? We need to make sure that they get to the counties. We may represent 45% of the roads, but we have a small percentage of the funding actually makes it to county roads. And if you look at all locals, it's actually 75% of the roads that we actually own. So that's a serious problem. You know about the structurally deficient bridges we have in this country. What you may not know, over 100,000 structurally deficient bridges, more than half of them are on county roads or local roads. And what do? We allocate those resources properly. We direct those funds to structurally deficient bridges regardless of who owns them. It doesn't matter if it's a county, a city, or a state, but if we address structurally deficient bridges regardless of ownership, we can start to deal with our infrastructure crisis. The other thing is streamlining, which actually relates to funding. When it costs twice as much and takes twice as long to build a road using federal dollars than county dollars, we've got a funding issue there. Another way to look at that is we could build twice as much road for that $1 if we improve streamlining. Now, Map 21 was a good start. It established a $5 million threshold for environmental review. What NACo is proposing, we take that threshold that already exists and we apply it to federal regulations. Projects under $5 million do not require the federal oversight. That's probably 80% of our projects that we're looking at. Now, we still follow state and local regulations. It's not like we're in the Wild West doing whatever we want. We're just not having to deal with this incredible oversight. We use the same oversight on sideway projects as we do multi-million-dollar bridges, and that just doesn't make any sense, does it? Not at all. The last thing is safety. We lose 33,000 people a year die on local roads. I'm sorry, on all highways. Did you realize 60% of those fatalities occur on rural roads? More than half occur on rural roads, yet we get somewhere between 5 to 10% of the funding. That's really unconscionable when you think about it. There's not one person in this room that hasn't been directly or indirectly impacted by a highway fatality. And so we need to direct those resources there. And there's a simple way to do this. Allocate resources based on fatalities and serious injuries, and require states to include counties in the development of their plans. Minnesota did that, and you cut your fatalities in half. So please consider that as we move forward. Thank you.
We very much appreciate that we now have with us Representative Tom Petri from Wisconsin, and he is the chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee Subcommittee on Highways and Transit. Representative Petri.
Thank you. Thank you for organizing this rally. Thank you for emphasizing and underlining the importance of a good first-rate surface transportation program, not only to our nation and to the states that make up our nation, but to the local communities. It's a seamless thing. And we need first-rate infrastructure in the feeder roads and in the main backbone, the interstate highway system as well. We really appreciate the fact that the National Highway Program is a federal, state, local partnership. And as chairman of the Highway Subcommittee, we're working very hard to make sure that we get in place a good 6-year reauthorization bill. We know that people want to get value for the dollar that they spend, and one way to do that is to have a good longer-term framework rather than a lot of jerking around and stopping and starting. Because when we have the framework at the national level, they still have to work at it at the state level, and then it takes a couple budget cycles. And if we start having uncertainty at the national level, a lack of resolve, a lack of a good framework, what we're going to do is see a lot of more major projects all around our country neglected or fall behind. So we really appreciate the fact that you're here in Washington taking time out of your busy schedules to represent your citizens and businesses and communities in doing what you can to work with us to make sure that we do our job and get in place a good funded 6-year surface transportation program, if possible, before the current one expires on September 30th this year. Thank you very much for what you do, and we will be getting a bill out. We've had been meeting, we've been meeting in our committee, and in the Senate's doing the same with various stakeholder groups. We're trying very hard, not just road builders, but manufacturers, retailers. This is something that sometimes people talk about as something, well, just jobs for the construction industry. That's not the case. It's jobs for America, and it undergirds our standard of living and our economy. And we are planning to get a bill out later this spring for everyone to look at and for the Senate to look at and start the process. And whatever bumps we run into along the road, we know we face a crisis of funding because of the trust fund revenue being only covering about 60% of the program going forward. But sometimes, the crisis is also an opportunity, because it will provide an occasion for us as a nation to look at this and decide what we really want and whether we're going to step up to the bat and pay for what we need to maintain our standard of living. And I think the answer will be, it won't be automatic. People want to make sure they're getting value for money, but at the end of the day, the answer will be yes. And I thank you for being here to help us get to that yes.
I would now invite Peter McLaughlin to come up here and speak from Hennepin County, Minnesota.
Thank you very much. I just want to offer a few comments from the local perspective regarding transit. When we built our first LRT line, the Hiawatha line, it was opened up in 2004, the first building block in our process was the federal funding. That was the solid building block that we then build around with local support and state support to get that line built. It has since opened, it has blown the doors off of the ridership predictions, and we are now we're on the verge on Flag Day this year, we're going to open our second LRT line connecting Minneapolis and St. Paul. What we need though is this reliable, strong federal partner in this process. We don't have the federal funding is not the solid building block it once was with Hiawatha. We have plans to build out a modern 21st century transportation system. We have 5 counties in our metro area that have actually imposed a 1/4-cent sales tax on their own. Went to the legislature, said, give us the authority to tax ourselves. We did it. We throw all the money into a pot, one pot of a joint powers board, and we've invested over $500 million already. And we're ready to invest more, but we need a reliable, strong federal partner to make that happen. And so, as I look out at our spreadsheet for these future projects, the question marks are in the federal column, and we need the federal government to be that partner if we're going to succeed in building the 21st century transportation system that we need in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, but across the country. And so that's why I'm proud to be here today with my colleagues from NACo to urge the Congress to do this long-term bill that keeps the federal government as our partner in building American infrastructure. Thank you.
It is not. Okay, Randy Luchnik, another Minnesotan.
Too many Minnesotans.
I guess.
My name's Randy Maluchnik from Carver County, Minnesota. We've had some Minnesotans here. We need 6 years of sustained funding in this reauthorization bill. We understand in Minnesota what happens when a bridge fails. Painfully remember what happens. My one example, we have a bridge that goes across the river between two counties, Carver County, mine, and our good friends to the south in Scott County. It's a state-owned bridge. Flooded 3 times in less than 18 months. Imagine what kind of pressure and capacity that puts on other bridges, the structural damage it does, not to even consider for a moment the safety problems that would bring along with the traffic congestions. And also it has to also have some kind of a problem or effect on our economic or the region economic development and health there. So what we did, the counties got together with the state, we put together a program, we collaborated, we partnered, and believe it or not, we're going to get that bridge replaced. Sometimes we had to drag the state along, but they come along anyway. And I can understand why they did, because my county, Carver County, is floating $27 million for the state on that. We're actually loaning it to the state so we can build a state bridge across a river to make it safe and to make life better there in Carver County. So that's our story, local story. Remember, we need 6-year reauthorization. We have to have that sustained funding to make things happen. So thank you.
A few quick facts that may be of interest, and that is that Congress has relied on more than $50 billion in transfers from the general fund to meet its obligation, and that's a trend that continued under MAP 21. So as we look to see the end of that allocation in sight, we will also want to highlight the fact that the American Society of Civil Engineers, in their 2013 report card for America's infrastructure, gave the nation's infrastructure a D+, and estimates that a total investment needs at $3.6 trillion, that would be with a T, by 2020, leaving a funding shortfall of $1.6 trillion based on current funding levels. So despite our growing demand for infrastructure investment to keep goods and people moving across this country, the trust fund shortfall and the gas tax that's not been raised since 1993, we clearly have a problem on our hands. So I would invite Representative Rodney Davis from Illinois. He's a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee to join us. Thank you.
Wow, it's always great to come to an event when you're about ready to leave and we make you regather. Even in Washington speak, I feel bad. And I'm not going to talk long, but I'm actually proud to be here, and I apologize it took us so long to get here. But transportation is very important to me. My district is in central Illinois, the crossroads of many interstates and many capital projects and infrastructure projects that need to be addressed. I'm probably one of the only, if not the only, Republican who ran in a targeted district last time that ran on the need for increased infrastructure funding, increased infrastructure investment. And if we don't take this time to be able to work together in a bipartisan way that we've seen on very important issues like a farm bill, we've seen on very important issues like the water bill that's currently being conferenced right now, we have the leadership in place. Bill Schuster is doing a phenomenal job of bringing everyone together. Bill Schuster is going to lead our committee to hopefully an agreement that we've already begun the process, but we need your help. And if we don't get this done, America and future generations are the ones that are going to suffer. So it's all hands on deck, and I appreciate your support because infrastructure is an area where all of us, if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you decide you're more of a transit official, your roads, rails, air, we all agree that we can work together and get something done. We can debate the funding sources all we want, but the bottom line is, if we don't open the debate of increasing investment in infrastructure, we get nothing. So thanks for everything you do today. Sorry we took so long.
We also want to welcome Representative Bill Foster, member of the House Financial Services Committee, and happenstantially Jim Healy's congressman.
Thank you all, and thank you, President Linda Langston, for the good work that this organization does. My district stretches from Chicago's western suburbs to include Aurora and Joliet. It's at the nexus of transportation systems that circulate to the south of Lake Michigan. And I know very well how important the investments in surface transportation and infrastructure are. Every day my constituents and all the businesses that they work with rely on the roads, bridges, and commuter transit to get to work and to get their kids to school. Ensuring that we have safe and reliable and affordable transportation options is critical to my constituents, as it is a priority for me. As a nation, we need to do a lot more than just maintain the status quo. We need to commit to a sustained effort of improving our transportation networks. Unfortunately, as we all know, the Highway Trust Fund has been falling short of where it needs to be, just to maintain the current levels of spending. So I applaud the President for including a 4-year surface transportation reauthorization in his budget proposal for 2015. It's not 6 years, but it's a start. And Congress needs to follow suit and increase the level of infrastructure investment that can be made through the Highway Trust Fund. And I congratulate Congressman Davis on his willingness to talk seriously about the funding mechanisms that will be necessary for that. Because this really ought to be a bipartisan issue that both Democrats and Republicans can support together. But unlike many of the policy changes that we face today, challenges we face today, the big question is how to pay for it. And so ultimately it comes down to a matter of priorities. And we have to ask ourselves as a country, how big a priority is it to improve infrastructure? As a businessman and as a scientist, I look at this as a matter of return on investment. And infrastructure investments have some of the highest return on investments of anything that our country can do. And consider that the federal government right now is about to spend $1.4 trillion on the next generation manned fighter jet, the Joint Strike Fighter. And that is more than the interstate highway system for the 40 years after President Eisenhower initiated it cost our country. And so we ask ourselves, what is the return on different kinds of investments? And to understand that infrastructure should not be given a short shift. So it's all about priorities, and investing in transportation and infrastructure is absolutely critical And it's critical that this time we make it a bigger priority. So today I'm proud to join you in the call for Congress to pass a new surface transportation bill and that provides a long-term certainty. So as a scientist and businessman, I understand that on projects with this level of complexity, you need long-term certainty to succeed and to be able to spend transportation dollars efficiently and prudently. So this is a critical issue for my district and for our country, and that's why I'm proud to stand with you here today, and thank you all.
Go do your picture, right?
Yeah, well, we got one more guest. We just thought we'd yeah, just because.
We have the other scientist.
Yes, we do. I suppose we have to light you up here, right?
Well, it's just a chemist. We got a physicist.
Yeah, you can probably. So before joining the Senate in 2010, much to our pleasure, Senator Coons spent 4 years as the Newcastle County Council President and 6 years as the Newcastle County Executive. He's a member of the Appropriations Committee and the Budget Committee, and I'm trying to remember what committees you served on at NACo. We just went out and had fun together. So we are very delighted to have Senator Chris Coons with us today.
Thank you, President Langston. Thank you to everyone in leadership at NACo, and thank you for what you do week in and week out, year in and year out. As you heard, I cut my teeth in county government. It was the best, at times the longest, but certainly the most challenging decade of my life. My wife was in county government before I was, and the two of us together spent 16 years in county service in Newcastle County, Delaware. It is the largest county in Delaware, but I know that's not saying much. So, we have a challenge nationally, as we all know. Counties are responsible for so much of what touches the daily lives of Americans, from human services to social services to criminal justice to transportation. We cannot have a safe and strong and sound America if we don't have a predictable long-term path towards financing the repair and the proper maintenance of our bridges and our highways. Nearly half of all the bridges and highways in America are maintained and are operated by county governments. And I remember when I did my first Build America Bonds project as a county executive, I thought this is great, this is simple, this is a good way for us to work together on private sector infrastructure investment with the public sector. I came to Congress and fully expected the first bill I'd be signing on to was the Build America Bonds reauthorization, and was stunned to discover that partisanship was getting in the way. One moment of encouragement, if I might. I am convinced, after watching closely, that Senator Boxer is uniquely capable as a former county supervisor and as someone who has shown an ability to work well across the aisle to get us not just a temporary fix, not just a short-term plug, but a long-term reauthorization that sets the path forward towards effective ways to leverage public dollars to engage county electeds and county communities with a new federal conversation around a new long-term transportation reauthorization. So join me in a round of applause for our hero, I believe, Senator Boxer, who is going to work with Senator Bill to make sure that we deliver on the transportation reauthorization for America's future. At the end of the day, the only way things move forward for America is if things move forward for counties. If things can move forward in combination between the federal government, the county government, and the private sector, we can get great things done for this country. I am determined to work with you, Madam President, and everybody in NACo leadership. My door is always open. I'm grateful for your friendship, advice, encouragement, and occasional support. I very much appreciate all the things I learned from Luck and RAC and all the other committees on which I served while at NACo.
I'm impressed you still remember their names.
I still remember the names all too well. I was going to meet on Monday night, but we had 6 inches of snow, which around here counts as snow. In Iowa, it doesn't count for much anything. It's just a dusting. So, thank you for being the passionate public servant you are, and for being determined to help lead a bipartisan group here on behalf of NACo to get a long-term transportation reauthorization bill.
Thank you, Senator.
Look forward to it.
We would also like to welcome Representative Jeff Denham, who's a member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee.
Well, thank you. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to speak just for a couple minutes today. MAP 21 or a new highway transportation bill is something we're very focused on right now. We've been holding a number of different hearings over the last year just to discuss what this might look like. Obviously we have our challenges. We continue to talk about doing more with less. We've been doing more with less for a very, very long time. While I still think that there's opportunities to do some streamlining, we've got to find some alternative funding ways to fund these projects. And as chair of the rail subcommittee, we're looking at many ways to doing that. One is RIF loans. You know, the RIF program is not doing what it was supposed to do. We have billions of dollars that are sitting out there that could be utilized immediately to get some of these projects moving and moving quickly. My good friend John Delaney spoke here earlier, but we're aligned to setting up an infrastructure bank, coming up with new ideas, either with repatriation and having that surplus money utilized as an infrastructure bank. That is another way of looking at coming up with dollars that we just don't have today. But we're going to have to get very creative. I mean, the gas tax that we once had is terribly short right now. And, you know, certainly we're doing a lot with electric vehicles, with natural gas vehicles, with other ways of transportation that do not pay into that gas tax fund. So as long as we know that that gas tax is going to be short, we've got to look at alternative ways to come up with the revenue, because all of our communities, whether it's my rural area in California and Central Valley or some of our big urban areas, we have huge needs with our bridges that are falling apart, our rail infrastructure that has been lacking, and in some areas becoming dangerous, and our highways that have been sorely underfunded for quite some time. But I believe, as many have spoken already, that to get our country really moving again, it's our backbone, it's our infrastructure, both in getting our infrastructure moving, but also getting our infrastructure improved that will get people back to work. So thank you for giving me a few minutes here to talk today, and look forward to continuing to work with all of you.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who came. We appreciate all the attention, and we look forward to working together. We appreciate being at the table with all of you. Thank you so much.
I'll lock the door so no one else can come in.
Yeah.
I was very optimistic about the rally and the support from congressional folks that came by in discussing the long-range bill, one that would give us a certainty of funding for a 6-year period of time. You know, we talked about several things. We talked about the cost, the increased cost of construction, and we talked about things that might be able to be done to shorten that period, concurrent review of projects versus just, you know, looking at them not in a concurrent type basis. And then, so the thing that was most exciting though was just hearing everyone say that we needed guaranteed funding, that we needed a long-term bill that would allow us to be able to do long-term planning.